After 17 seasons in the NBA, Al Horford can finally call himself an NBA champion. As one of the oldest players in NBA history to win their first ring, I was thinking back on how many players like Horford have been a part of championship rosters. Players who have stuck around for a really long time just to win a ring near the end of their careers. And there's no official term for it, but I coined the term the old man ring. Obviously, being in your late 30s and early 40s isn't generally considered old, but in sports, you're probably on your way out, so I don't know if that'll stick at all, but I just want to explain what I'm getting at, so let's go over the criteria I created for what constitutes a player getting one. My name is Caleb, and it's not going to be super concrete, but each old man ring typically has some sort of combination of the criteria we'll go over, but every player that we go over in this should fit into each category in some way, so let's jump in. First, I think we can agree that it has to be a late career ring, whether it's a first ring or someone who got a ring earlier in their career with a huge gap in between their next one. An old man ring has to be one sooner to a player's retirement than earlier. Second, and it probably shouldn't have to be explained, but it has to be an older player on the team who has had a really long career. Most of the time it's the oldest player on a team, so the older a player is, the more of an old man ring it becomes. Let's say it has to be at least a 12-year career, give or take a season or two. Third, I feel like you have to be a fan favorite in some capacity, either loved by the team's fans or generally by basketball fans. You might not be happy that a certain team wins the finals, but you can put aside certain biases to be happy for a specific player who got to add a ring to their resume. And fourth, I think you have to be integral to the team's championship. Whether it's contribution on the court or just being a good locker room guy, contributing to the ring in some way is pretty important too. So with that being said, I want to talk about a few notable players since 1980 who won late career rings that could be considered an old man ring. Believe it or not, there weren't a ton of players who were winning championships a decade plus into their careers during the 80s, especially first or second rings, which I think makes the old man ring more special. Careers are a lot longer nowadays for a bunch of reasons, but if you weren't on the Showtime Lakers or the Celtics back then, it was hard to win a ring regardless. But I did find a couple players who fit the criteria, and I won't go over every single championship team, just some that I think are worthy of note. There were a couple debatable old man rings in the early 80s, most notably Julius Erving, who won his first championship in year 11 with the Sixers, but still went on to play 4 more seasons at an all-star level, so his age didn't necessarily show with his play. One of the older examples I can think of when it comes to this concept was the late great Bill Walton. We know Walton is one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, as when he was healthy, he was one of the best centers to ever touch a basketball, and he's still a Hall of Famer at the end of the day. But after years of injuries, he finally put together a healthy season and won the Sixth Man of the Year in 1986 with Boston, who would go on to win the 86 Finals against the Rockets, which was the second of Walton's career after winning in 1977 with the Blazers. And while 33 isn't considered super old nowadays, he would only go on to play 10 more regular season games before calling it a career, mostly because of injuries. Moving on to the 90s, a debatable example from this decade is Clyde Drexler, who won his only NBA championship in year 11 after teaming up with his college teammate Hakeem Olajuwon. The 95 Rockets are to this day the lowest seed to win an NBA championship and are also notable because it was the year Clyde finally got his ring. Clyde was always known as the second best two guard in the league at the time behind MJ, and even though he got the Blazers to the finals twice in 10 years in Portland, he couldn't quite get over the hump until he got to Houston. But like the 80s, there aren't that many contenders for old man rings, mostly thanks to the two Bulls three-peats, but I think Jerome Kersey on the 99 Spurs has a case. Like Drexler, he was a mainstay on the Blazers in the 80s and early 90s, but he'd make his way to the Spurs during the lockout-shortened season in 1999 to win his first NBA championship. He was in his 14th season and 36 years old, so I think this is a really good example of what the concept is getting at. The early 2000s also lacked very few old man rings thanks to the Shaq and Kobe Lakers because all the older players on those teams had already won championships with other teams, and unfortunately denied my Pacers a ring in their only finals appearance, which would have given Reggie Miller an old man ring himself. But as I continue to suffer without my team having a championship, we get to the 2003 Spurs, who defeated the Nets in the 03 finals, where at the age of 40, 17-year vet Kevin Willis won his first NBA championship. Willis was a solid starting center for a really long time, even becoming an NBA All-Star in 1992, and though he was way past his prime in San Antonio, he still logged 70 games in around 11 minutes that season. Willis is still tied for the second most seasons ever played, and is one of the more notable old man rings of that era. And then we get to the 06 Miami Heat, who probably have the two best old man rings on the same team, as Gary Payton and Alonzo Mourning both won their first championship that year. I don't need to go too much into detail on their careers since they're both in the Hall of Fame, but with Gary Payton being arguably the best defensive guard ever and Mourning being one of the best big men of the 90s, them winning their first championship while also being contributing players to the team solidified their statuses as all-time greats if they weren't already legitimized before. I think we're far enough from 2010 that I can consider everything 2010 and up recent NBA history, which means both that we're getting old and two gives us a clear time frame of what I consider to be recent. Richard Jefferson, I think, is the next solidified old man ring of the 2010s. Obviously a fan favorite, but never made the all-star team, even though he had some all-star level seasons, and he contributed to the 2016 Cavs. So I think at the age of 35 and in year 14, I think you have to consider this an old man ring for sure. And in my lifetime, there's never been more parity than now, so that means that this decade, a more variety of players are winning championships instead of just a handful of dynasties. So out of the few old man rings this decade, I think I have to mention PJ Tucker on the 2021 Bucks, another player who won a championship at age 35 and contributed to the team. Certified old man ring for sure. And then the 2023 Nuggets, I think, is the first team with 3 old man rings on the same team. DeAndre Jordan, Ish Smith, and Jeff Green. All fan favorite players, all have had long careers. DeAndre Jordan at one point was an all-star, all-league defender, one of the best rebounders in the game, so seeing him get to add a ring to his resume was really cool. Ish Smith holding the NBA record for playing for the most teams in NBA history and only just now winning a ring last season. You gotta feel good for him. And then Jeff Green, one of the last players in the league currently to ever play for the Seattle Supersonics, one of the better role players over the last 15 years and has been solid everywhere he's been, also finally getting a ring. And then with each player being in their mid to late 30s and it being their first rings, we have the first old man ring trifecta. Obviously the old man ring is something I made up, but I do think it could be applied to at least one player on every championship team. I know the ring conversation is kind of tiring at this point in sports culture, especially basketball, so I just wanted to look at it from a different angle. The reality of sports is that everybody isn't going to win a championship, so I can only imagine how it feels to win one on your way out of the league. So not a super serious video, but if you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. My name is Caleb, and I'll catch you on the next one.